What's going on, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on a Thursday, November 21st, 2024. And we got a big episode of the pod in store for you guys. Plenty of recruiting talk as on 3's Steve Wiltfong is in to discuss Dan Lanning and the Ducks and their push ahead of the early signing period. Steve, how we doing?
Man, doing well, Max, but I'm not sure I'm ever doing as well as the Ducks, crushing it on the field, already clinched a spot in the Big Ten title game, coming back to my city of Indianapolis. They were here recently, beat Purdue just up the road. Coming back for the Big Ten title game, Max, the last time Dan Lanning coached inside Lucas Oil Stadium, Georgia beat Alabama for the national championship in that ball game. So I know he's excited to come back in a head coach variety and take on whoever they play and then see where that puts them in the college football playoff.
The Ducks are crushing it on a bye this week ahead of their regular season finale with Washington out there in Eugene. So we're going to talk 2025 because the early signing period is officially less than 2 weeks away, Steve. So I know it's full steam ahead for you and I. But the Ducks are going to be hosting one of the best prospects in the country this weekend with Stewart out of New Orleans, Edna Carr, 5-star defensive lineman, returning to Eugene for the second time this season on an unofficial visit. What are your thoughts on this Stewart recruitment and particularly Oregon's chances here as we get closer to the finish line?
Well, Oregon remains one of the programs that has the best shot to land Stewart. He's been to campus several times, been there in the spring, camped in the summer, went to the win over Ohio State earlier this fall. That was his official visit. He got a chance to really observe Coach Lupoy and that staff from his seat, coaching up the players throughout the game. It was an insane atmosphere inside Autzen Stadium. He soaked all of that up, and now he is returning to campus for an unofficial visit where he'll take in Eugene's nature. He'll hunt, he'll fish. It'll be a low-key weekend. He'll get around the coaches. He'll get around the players in that kind of environment. Certainly, they'll talk about opportunities at Oregon on and off the field. But I think Oregon's one of the front runners. He's coming off an official visit to USC. That was a huge needle mover for the Trojans. USC was always one of his favorites as well. But that visit went above and beyond. He sees an opportunity to be an instant impact player for USC. His relationship with Eric Henderson, their defensive line coach and New Orleans native, is second to none. And the opportunities that USC showed that a football player could have off the field was absolutely phenomenal. So this is a true blue chip battle in the new age of recruiting. Oregon gets him on campus this weekend. He will be at Ohio State for the Michigan game in 2 weeks. He's already been to one Ohio State game this year. And then LSU rounds out the top four. What will they do as they continue their push to keep Stewart in state? But I like Oregon's position right now. But USC certainly moved the needle. Ohio State gets one more shot, and it's Oregon's ball right now.
It's such an interesting recruitment to follow, Steve, because I was kind of in the camp of thinking Oregon took the lead for Stewart coming off of that official visit for the Ohio State game. And it seems like you hear great things for whatever school he visits that weekend. But I feel like he still has a lot of love for the Ducks, and Oregon has to like their position right now. And it seems like that they could still be in the lead right now, but we know that Henderson connection and the Louisiana connection is something that's keeping USC in the mix. So I don't think you can count any of these schools out by any means, but given how hot Oregon is right now on the field and on the recruiting trail, I'm feeling pretty good about their chances to add Stewart when all is said and done, but we still got some time to go here.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, big weekend for him to just see what the day in the life of an Oregon football player is away from football, and then to continue talking about those opportunities away from the football field.
So we'll keep an eye on that one. We got all your guys' coverage over on ScoopDuck.com. You can try us out for just $1, get you 1 week, and then that rolls into 50% off of an annual membership. So we got plenty to talk about here as the Ducks try to close strong in the 2025 class. Another big target we got to talk about, Steve. Let's just keep a 5-star theme rolling here in the 2025 class. Is Naim Alford, the 5-star cornerback from the state of Alabama, committed to Ohio State. This one seems like it's changing almost daily. It's just so fluid. But right now, it seems like it might be becoming, Oregon and Auburn. But you have Florida entering the mix too with an OV last weekend. So what do you make of the Naim Alford recruitment?
Well, I think Naim Alford and his family are real comfortable with Oregon. They like the coaching staff, certainly where they're at as a program, the development those defensive backs are getting, and again, opportunities that players have away from the football field. So I would not be surprised if Naim Alford ultimately ended up in Oregon's class. I don't think I think it's going to be hard for Ohio State to keep him in the fold. He'll be at Ohio State next weekend for the Michigan game, but he's been to Auburn several times this fall, practiced games, was just at Florida, been out to Oregon numerous times. Ohio State has a battle on their hands, and I would take the field over Ohio State. And I kind of like where Oregon's at right now.
I do too. I think the I'm gonna have something out on the site later today, but I'm getting a little bit more confident in Oregon's chances to add Naim Alford as time goes on here. But I'm also interested to see how Brandon Finney does or does not affect this recruitment, because we know that Michigan and Penn State are making a big push there for one of the biggest senior risers in the On3 rankings. So the relation of those two recruitments is going to be one to watch. As far as Alford goes, Steve, what do you make of just the continued pushback of those Ohio State visits? Because I'm in the same camp as you. I don't think this is one that the Buckeyes are going to be able to hang on to.
Well, I think in a perfect world, he would have loved to have already gone to an Ohio State game this year, but it's, logistics and proximity don't make it easy. But he's had this game next weekend on the radar for quite some time. So we'll see if he makes it up.
We'll see if he makes it up and what that means in his recruitment. So that's a big guy to watch for Oregon in this 2025 class. I don't think he's one that a lot of people took Oregon seriously for, but as we get closer to the early signing period, it seems like that's starting to grow a bit. And I think it's been a little bit too quiet or a little bit too slow on the recruiting trail for Oregon. So something's going on. I think they're building towards a big finish here in the 2025 class. Another big prospect we got to talk about, newly minted 5-star, a 2025 quarterback, Jaren Kiavi-Sagapolu-Tele out of the state of Hawaii. He's been in headlines recently as he lines up trips ahead of making a final decision. It looks like he's going to be returning to Berkeley this weekend for the Cal-Stanford game. I think they're playing Stanford. But what do you make of Jaren's recruitment and where the Ducks stand there?
Well, at the very least, Oregon's given him a lot to think about. He's Hawaii's all-time leading passer, about to be their all-time touchdowns passing leader as well, having an epic career. Hawaii, the tradition of Oregon quarterbacks that they've had from Marcus Mariota to now Dillon Gabriel, I think it excites him to be part of that lineage. He had a great official visit. He met Dillon Gabriel at the Elite 11 finals during the summer in Los Angeles. They reconnected on his visit. Certainly Will Stein, the offense, the way Oregon has developed quarterbacks and put them in position to be very successful. Oregon has, at the very least, given him a lot to think about with Cal and Georgia rounding out the final three.
And I think right now I still feel good about Oregon being the team to beat, but with recruits taking visits and especially to Georgia, I think you look at Georgia as maybe more of a threat here than you do Cal, just different levels of the programs there. I think one of the reasons I feel confident about Oregon is their connection to the state of Hawaii and what they're doing there. Their more recent momentum with developing quarterbacks and sending them to the league. And just two, I think there's some kind of a timing element here with Georgia being a later school to get involved here. So Oregon had been keeping tabs on him. They got him on campus for an official visit earlier this year. And I think that's really where they took the lead in this recruitment. But with big time quarterbacks, you can never rule anything out. It's not over until it's over. And it seems like he's going to be taking all the trips as he should before he comes to a final decision. But I like the Ducks here right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll keep following that one and see what's coming up, down the line as we get closer to the early signing period. The Ducks have the number 7 recruiting class in the 2025 class, according to the On3 rankings. I believe they have 16 verbal commitments right now, but they're still in contention for a handful of guys here. So I think let's see where we can go here. That's the only other big 2025 visitor with Jakeem Stewart that we talked about this weekend. How about we switch it up and talk about tight end a little bit, because that is one of the more interesting positions to follow here as Oregon gets closer to the early signing period. Lincoln Cure, the Kansas State verbal commitment, has been really at the top of the wish list for Drew Maringer and Oregon at tight end, Steve. And it looks like he's going to try to make a return out to Eugene for that Washington game, a trip that was supposed to happen for the Maryland game, but he got snowed in. So what do you kind of make of Oregon right now and Lincoln Cure? Because he's been linked to the Ducks for quite a while now.
Well, I think Oregon's still battling uphill, but Lincoln obviously has genuine interest in Oregon. He's been out to campus several times and continues to talk often with Coach Lanning and Coach Maringer. And coming back to campus, he wants to be a graphic designer. Getting a chance to meet with some former Oregon football players that are now designing for Nike is something that he's excited about, and Oregon is certainly excited about showcasing to him. Look, they already flipped Vanderploot from Washington, a talented, high upside, big play tight end. So they've gotten one win against Washington on the trail, looking to get a win against them next week on Saturday. And then you have Andrew Olish, top 5 tight end in the country, committed to Michigan right now, visiting Michigan this week. But he is too slated to be back at Oregon next weekend. That will be his second visit to Oregon this fall. So the Ducks becoming a contender down the stretch for Andrew Olish alongside Penn State.
And I want to get your thoughts on this one, Steve. I know for me personally, when I look at Lincoln Cure and Andrew Olesh, as far as who I think is a little bit more realistic, I tend to side with Cure just because they've been in that recruitment for a much longer time. He's been out to Eugene more times, to my knowledge, than Olesh has. But I'm curious just to see how the dynamic works with both of those guys hypothetically on campus in the same weekend. So are you kind of in that same camp? Do you think Cure is a little bit more likely for Oregon, or do you think Olesh needs a bit more mention?
I'm still jury out on both. Obviously, Olish has great interest to be coming back a second time. So I think that that's an interesting recruitment down the stretch as well.
Okay. We got a couple more guys to talk about while we have Steve Wiltfong here on the show, but just wanted to take a quick second to shout out Ranchito Grill in Springfield, one of our sponsors here on the podcast. Not sure what your dinner plans are, but head on over to Ranchito. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Try out the homemade tortillas while you're there and let them know that Max Torres sent you. Say what's up to my guy, Ruben. But we're here on a Thursday on the Ducks Dish podcast. Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, talking with On 3's Steve Wiltfong. Steve, one of the newer names that has emerged for Oregon in this 2025 class down the stretch is another, believe it or not, another prospect committed to another school, and that is 2025 Auburn linebacker commit Elijah Mendez out of the state of Florida. He took a trip out to Oregon for the Maryland game, and it looks like the Ducks are trying to stay in the mix here and maybe pull for a flip. It's been pretty hush-hush. I don't think I've seen a lot of interviews from him lately. So what do you make of that development for the Ducks?
Well, it makes me wonder if things are in such a promising position for the young man committed to Baylor that we had trending towards Oregon. I know Baylor's done a good job of fighting back in that recruitment for Caleb Burns. Elijah Melendez has always been on the board for Oregon. That's a developing recruitment as well.
Yeah, that kind of goes hand in hand with a little bit of the buzz that I was hearing earlier this week, just that Baylor is making a strong push to try to keep him in the state of Texas and as one of the better players in their 2025 class. So I think if Oregon does find themselves in the situation where they can't add Caleb Burns, you don't want to come away empty-handed, but we also know they're trending for McKay Madsen in the 2025 class at linebacker, but he's a mission guy, so he's a little bit down the road. So we'll keep an eye on Melendez and see if the Ducks can, in fact, flip him away from the Tigers. Steve, the last big picture topic I wanted to hit on with you while I have you here on the show is rankings and Oregon's push for a number 1 class, because it didn't necessarily seem like it was in the cards earlier in this cycle. I myself said probably top 5 finish is what it's looking like for Oregon. But fast forward to now, and you look at the caliber of talent that they're still in the mix for, do you think that they could really get the number 1 class?
Certainly. I think that they're right there in the thick of it. All the names that we just talked about right there, those are realistic options for them on the trail, particularly a Jakeem Stewart, Jaron Sagapolitelli, And then obviously you're right there for a Naim Alford. You go out there and land 3 5-stars to end your recruiting class, they're going to be right there pushing Georgia and others for that number 1 spot.
And we'll keep an eye on what visitors come in for that Washington game. Of course, that's the last opportunity the Ducks will have to host. Believe they'll have in-home visits before the early signing period. I'm not sure how that changes with the new timeline.
Title game they're preparing for. Zach Stokowski's another guy to mention there, Max, in-state offensive line recruit committed to the Huskies. That could ultimately end up with Oregon. Oregon's got a big need on the offensive line following the season, looking for some ready-made guys from the prep ranks and portal. It'll be an extremely important portal cycle for Oregon on the offensive line as well.
Yeah, Siskowski is definitely a big name in state, and I put an RPM pick in for him earlier on this week. I think that Oregon has some competition there. Just came off a visit to Georgia. Looks like he'll be at Michigan this weekend before taking his final official visit with the Ducks. So we'll monitor that one, and I like Oregon's chances right now. But I guess the last one I have for you, Steve, what do you think is key for Oregon between now and the early signing period to ultimately go out with a bang?
Well, it's hard to give them some keys because they've had the Midas touch since Dan Lanning and company arrived, right? They've recruited at a high level. They're playing at a high level. Just stay the course. Keep doing what they're doing. Meaningful relationships, having the infrastructures and resources organized, and then playing at a high level.
There you go. Pretty simple, steady as she goes. I have never seen Oregon this hot on the field and on the recruiting trail heading into the early signing period in my time covering the Ducks. So I think it could be very special for Oregon fans coming pretty soon here in the next couple of weeks. But that's Steve Wiltfong. Make sure you guys tap in with him at @SWiltfong_. And you can find me anywhere at Torres Sports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck on through YouTube channel. Help us get to 2K. And check us out at ScoopDuck.com for the very best in Oregon football and recruiting. But until next time, a big thank you to Steve for giving us some of his time. And we'll see you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.